filthy black bastard! Who the hell gave you permission to step foot in my precinct?
Owen Henderson froze in the doorway. Duffel bag, faded polo, first day.
I'm Officer Hinder, publicity or...
Shut your mouth!
Sergeant Dwayne Crawford snatched the folder from Owen's hands.
New guy? You?
Tore the papers in half, tossed them at Owen's feet.
Who'd your mama have to sleep with to get you in here?
Owen stood still, jaw tight, not a word. Crawford grabbed his collar.
Ah! Bet someone like you is real used to scrubbing toilets for other people, huh?
Shoved him into the wall.
Now get the hell out of my face! First floor bathroom, go clean it! Move!
14 cops watched. Not one said, stop. But what Crawford did on day one, that was nothing compared to what was coming on day two. Whew, buckle up, because what they did to this man after that, it only got worse. Ridgewood, New York. Population 85,000. Quiet enough to forget, loud enough when it wanted to be. The Ridgewood Police Department sat at the corner of Main and 4th, a 2-story brick building with a flagpole out front and a parking lot that hadn't been repaved since the Clinton administration. 200 sworn officers, 86% white. The kind of department where everyone knew everyone. Promotions moved through handshakes and outsiders didn't last long. For 2 straight years, the department had been bleeding. Excessive force complaints, mostly from Black and Latino residents, stacked up like parking tickets nobody wanted to pay. Local news ran segments. The city council held closed-door meetings. The previous captain, Bill Engel, retired 6 months early when an internal affairs probe started circling his office. The probe went nowhere. Engel walked away with full pension. Business as usual. Until Owen Henderson's name landed on the mayor's desk. Owen was 38. 15 years in law enforcement, 10 of those with the Virginia State Police, the last 4 as a lieutenant running internal affairs investigations out of Norfolk. Master's degree in criminal justice from George Mason University. Graduated top of his class at the Virginia State Police Academy. 2 Valor Awards, 3 commendations for de-escalation, a record so clean it squeaked. He didn't end up in Ridgewood by accident. He applied. He requested this posting specifically. He read every complaint, every news article, every leaked memo. He knew exactly what kind of department he was walking into, but knowing and feeling are 2 different things. That morning, Owen had woken up at 5:15 in a motel room off Route 9, 3 miles from the station. Ironed his polo on the desk because the motel didn't have an ironing board. Packed his duffel with essentials, toiletries, a change of clothes, and a sealed Department of Justice envelope containing his official appointment as captain of the Ridgewood Police Department. His uniform hadn't arrived yet. Admin told him it would be issued on-site after intake processing, so he showed up in plain clothes. And that was the beginning of everything. The man who had just spat on his shoes was Sergeant Dwayne Crawford, 45 years old, 22 years at Ridgewood, longer than some of the walls had been standing. Stocky, ruddy face, neck like a fire hydrant. He wore his sergeant's bars like they were 4-star general insignia and walked the hallways like he owned the deed. Crawford ran the day shift. He controlled overtime shift assignments, patrol zones, and the unwritten rules that mattered more than the written ones. He'd been passed over for captain twice. The first time he threw a chair in the break room. The second time he filed a grievance with the union, denied. When Engel retired, Crawford told everyone within earshot that the position was his. He'd earned it. 22 years. Nobody deserved it more. Then a name he'd never heard came down from the mayor's office. A transfer from Virginia. A black man. Crawford didn't just take it personally, he took it as war. Behind Crawford stood his shadow officer, Trent Whitmore, 28, tall, thin jaw like a ruler's edge, blonde hair combed tight to one side, uniform crisp and new. He'd been on the force 3 years, and every one of those years had been spent learning one thing: how to be Crawford's echo. When Crawford crossed his arms, Whitmore crossed his arms. When Crawford laughed, Whitmore laughed louder. Then there was Pete Dawson, 35, round shoulders, short neck, brown stubble. He stood where Crawford told him to stand, laughed when Crawford expected laughter, and never once formed an opinion that Crawford hadn't handed him first. And in the back, behind the front desk, half hidden by a filing cabinet, sat Officer Nora Sullivan, 32, red-brown hair pulled into a low ponytail, 8 years on the force. She hadn't laughed when Crawford spat on Owen's shoes. She hadn't said anything either. She just looked down at her keyboard and kept typing. The one person not in the building was the one person who knew exactly who Owen Henderson was. Deputy Chief Angela Moore was across town at a city council meeting. That wasn't an accident. She and Owen had agreed his first day would be unfiltered. No introduction, no escort, no safety net. Just Owen walking into the mouth of it, seeing exactly how deep the rot went. He was about to find out. Owen found the mop. First floor bathroom. End of the hall.
Past the booking desk. Past the break room where 4 officers sat eating breakfast sandwiches without looking up. Past a supply closet with a handwritten sign taped to the door. If it's not yours, don't touch it. The bathroom smelled like bleach and neglect. 2 stalls, 1 urinal, a sink with a slow drip that had left a rust stain shaped like a question mark. The mop was propped against the wall next to a yellow bucket with brown water still sitting in it from God knows when. Owen emptied the bucket, refilled it, got to work. He mopped the floor, scrubbed the toilet bowls with a brush that was missing half its bristles, wiped down the sink, cleaned the mirror. The whole time officers walked in and out, some to use the restroom, some just to watch. One officer leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, chewing gum, watched Owen scrub for a full minute without blinking, then pulled out his phone, snapped a photo, walked away laughing. Another officer walked in, used the urinal, didn't flush, and looked Owen dead in the eye on the way out. Missed a spot. A third came in just to wash his hands, took his time, let the water splash all over the counter Owen had just wiped clean, dried his hands with paper towels and dropped them on the floor 2 feet from the trash can. Didn't even glance at Owen. Nobody spoke to him directly, but they spoke about him like he wasn't there. Crawford's already got the new guy on toilet duty, first hour. Bet he doesn't last till lunch. $20 says he's gone by Wednesday. Owen kept mopping. When he finished, he walked back to the bullpen carrying the bucket. Crawford was leaning against the dispatch counter, telling a story to 3 officers who were laughing before he even reached the punchline. Owen set the bucket down. "Bathroom's done." Crawford didn't look at him, kept talking, mid-sentence. Like Owen was a sound that didn't register. Owen waited. 10 seconds. 20. 30. Crawford finally turned his head, slow, deliberate, the way you'd notice a fly that had been buzzing too long. "Done already?" He made a face. "Go do the 2nd floor too, and the women's restroom. And when you're finished with that, the break room needs a wipe down. Counters, microwave, fridge, the whole thing." "That's not exactly... Did I ask what you think it is?" Crawford pushed off the counter and stepped close enough that Owen could smell the coffee on his breath. "You're new. I'm not. When I tell you to clean, you clean. When I tell you to mop, you mop. When I tell you to shut up and listen, you shut up and listen. Are we clear?" Owen held his gaze for a beat, then nodded once. "Clear." "Good boy." Crawford patted Owen's cheek twice. Light, condescending, the kind of touch designed to remind you that someone owned the space you were standing in. 3 officers saw it happen. 2 smirked. 1, Nora Sullivan, turned her chair so her back was facing the bullpen. Owen picked up the bucket and walked toward the stairs. The 2nd floor bathroom was worse. Somebody had left a toilet unflushed, deliberately from the look of it. The seat was smeared. The floor around the base was wet with something that wasn't water. The trash can was overflowing with paper towels and crushed soda cans. Owen cleaned it. Every inch. Didn't complain, didn't hesitate. The women's restroom after that. Then the break room, counters sticky with dried coffee rings, a microwave caked with reheated chili,
A fridge with items in it older than Whitmore's career. A container in the back had grown something green and fuzzy that might have once been lasagna. Owen threw it all out, scrubbed the shelves, wiped down every surface.
For the next 3 hours, Owen Henderson, a decorated lieutenant with 15 years of service, 2 Valor Awards, and a master's degree in criminal justice, cleaned toilets, mopped floors, wiped counters, emptied fridges, and scrubbed stains that no new officer should have been anywhere near. Nobody offered to help. Nobody told him to stop. Nobody said, "This isn't how we treat new officers." Because at Ridgewood, this was exactly how they treated new officers. At least certain kinds of new officers. At 11:30, Crawford found Owen in the break room, finishing the fridge. "Henderson, leave that. I need you to move boxes." Boxes? "Evidence storage, basement. 46 boxes need to go from room B to room D. Should take you, I don't know, rest of the day." He tossed a pair of work gloves at Owen's chest. Owen caught them. "And don't open any of them. You're not cleared for evidence handling. You're just the mule." Whitmore appeared behind Crawford, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, smirking. He had his phone out, not quite pointing at Owen, but not putting it away either. "Hey, Crawford," Whitmore said. "Want me to supervise?" "Nah, he doesn't need supervision. He needs a leash." They both laughed. Owen pulled on the gloves and headed for the basement. The boxes were heavier than they needed to be. Case files, old equipment, sealed bags of God knows what. The basement was poorly lit. The hallway between room B and room D was narrow, and the dolly they'd left for him had one busted wheel that pulled hard to the left. On his 8th trip, Owen passed 2 officers coming down the basement stairs. They didn't step aside. The hallway was narrow enough for one person. Owen pressed himself flat against the wall, box balanced on his hip, and let them pass. One of them bumped Owen's shoulder on the way by, hard enough to shift the box. Not hard enough to call it anything but an accident. "Watch it," the officer said. Didn't look back. On his 15th trip, the dolly wheel finally gave out. Owen carried the remaining boxes by hand, 2 at a time, up and down the stairs. The basement had no ventilation. The air was thick, warm, and tasted like dust and old paper. It took Owen 3 hours. 3 hours of hauling, stacking, sweating through his polo in a basement with no air, while the rest of the department sat upstairs in air conditioning, doing actual police work. When he came back up at 2:45, his shirt was soaked. His arms ached. There was a cut on his left palm from a box with a torn corner. He walked to the bullpen. Crawford was at his desk. Whitmore was beside him. Dawson sat 2 desks over. "Boxes are moved." Crawford glanced up, looked at Owen's sweat-soaked shirt, his dusty pants, the thin line of blood on his palm. "Took you long enough. What, you stopped for a nap down there?" "No." "No what?" Owen paused. He understood the game. "No, Sergeant." "Better." Crawford leaned back, drummed his fingers on the desk. "Now we've got a little problem." He opened his desk drawer, pulled out a wallet, brown leather, scuffed. "Officer Dawson here says his wallet went missing from the locker room this morning, right around the time you were in there getting your gear." Crawford turned the wallet over in his hands. "Now it turned up 20 minutes ago. Guess where?" Owen said nothing. "Top shelf of your locker, wide open, just sitting there." "I didn't take anyone's wallet." Crawford stood up, slow, chair rolling back behind him. "See, that's interesting, because nobody else was in that locker room between 0800 and 0830 except you. Dawson here already confirmed the timeline." Dawson nodded, didn't make eye contact with Owen. Crawford walked around the desk, got close. "I'm not saying you took it. I'm saying it was in your locker. And in this department, that means something. Someone put it there." "Oh, someone put it there." Crawford looked at Whitmore. "You hear that? Someone put it there." Back to Owen. You've been here 6 hours, Henderson. 6. And you've already got a theft accusation sitting on your name. That's got to be some kind of record. He dropped the wallet on the desk with a slap. I'm not filing the report. Yet. But Dawson's statement is written. Whitmore witnessed the recovery. And if anything else goes missing in this building, anything, I know exactly whose locker I'm checking first. Owen looked at Crawford, then at Dawson, then at Whitmore, who still had his phone half raised like a weapon he wasn't sure how to use. Understood, Sergeant. Get yourself cleaned up. You look like hell. Crawford sat back down. And Henderson, tomorrow, show up earlier. You've got bathrooms again. Owen turned and walked toward the locker room. His hands were steady. His face was blank. His breathing was even. But inside his pocket, his phone had been recording since 8:15 that morning. Every word, every order, every accusation. Crawford thought he was breaking in a new recruit. He was building a case file against himself. Day 2 started at 6:15 in the morning. Owen showed up early like Crawford told him to. The parking lot was nearly empty. 3 cruisers, a maintenance van. Dawn hadn't fully broken yet, and the building's fluorescent lights made the hallway glow a pale, sickly yellow. Owen walked in through the front entrance, signed in at the desk. The overnight sergeant glanced at him, stamped the log, and went back to his crossword without a word. Owen headed for the locker room to change into the spare polo he'd brought from the motel. He opened his locker. Everything inside was soaked. His spare shirt, his towel, his personal notebook. Someone had poured liquid into the locker through the top vent water, maybe, or something worse. The smell was sharp. Ammonia. Like cleaning solution. His notebook pages were wrinkled and bleeding ink. The spare polo was drenched and stained yellow. Owen pulled the shirt out, held it up, let it drip onto the floor, then folded it, placed it back inside, and closed the locker. He wore the same polo from yesterday, the one still stiff with dried sweat from hauling 46 boxes in a basement with no air. When roll call started at 7, Crawford noticed immediately. "Henderson, same shirt 2 days in a row." He wrinkled his nose. "What's the matter? Your people don't believe in laundry." Laughter from the usual corners. Whitmore, Dawson. 2 officers Owen didn't know yet, but had already cataloged by badge number. Owen said nothing, took the same seat in the back row. Crawford ran the briefing, assignments, patrol zones, overtime approvals. Then at the end, almost like an afterthought, he turned to Owen. "Henderson, you're with Whitmore today. Ride along. Warehouse District." The warehouse district was Ridgewood's dead zone. Empty lots, abandoned factories, one operational trucking depot that generated maybe 2 calls a month. It was where the department sent people they wanted to forget about. Owen nodded. "Copy." "And Henderson Whitmore is the lead. You don't touch the radio. You don't touch the MDT. You don't speak to civilians. You sit in the passenger seat and you observe. That's it. You're furniture. Understood?" "Understood." Whitmore drove, windows up, a C off. July in upstate New York, the car was a greenhouse within 20 minutes. Whitmore didn't seem to notice, or didn't care. For the first hour, neither of them spoke. Whitmore circled the same 4 blocks, parked behind an empty loading dock, checked his phone, circled again. Then he started talking. "So where'd you really come from, Henderson?" "Virginia." "Virginia. 15 years, right? That's what your paperwork said before Crawford shredded it." A smile. 15 years and you end up here on toilet duty. What'd you do, sleep with somebody's wife?" Owen watched the road. "Just a transfer." "Nobody transfers to Ridgewood. People transfer out of Ridgewood." Whitmore glanced sideways. "So either you screwed up bad enough that nobody else would take you, or somebody sent you here as a punishment." Owen didn't answer. Whitmore pulled into an empty lot behind a shuttered warehouse, cut the engine. "Get out." "Why?" "Training exercise. Crawford's orders. Out of the car." Owen stepped out. The asphalt radiated heat in visible waves.
No shade, no breeze, just a sun that pressed down like a hand on the back of your neck. Whitmore walked around the cruiser, slow, hands on his belt. Here's the scenario. Felony traffic stop. I'm the officer. You're the suspect. I'm the what? The suspect. Hands on the hood. Spread your feet. Owen looked at Whitmore for a long moment, then placed his hands flat on the cruiser's hood. The metal was scorching. He could feel it through his palms, immediately sharp, burning the kind of heat that makes your brain tell your hands to pull back. He didn't. Whitmore frisked him, took his time, patted down Owen's sides, his legs, his waistband, pulled Owen's wallet out, flipped through it. Virginia driver's license, a debit card, a photo folded, worn at the edges. Whitmore looked at the photo. Who's this? Girlfriend. Put it back. Relax, it's just a question. He tucked the wallet back, then pulled Owen's phone from his front pocket. Owen's stomach tightened.
The phone was still recording. Whitmore turned it over. The screen was locked. He pressed the side button. The lock screen lit up. Just a default background, no notifications visible. Passcode. No. No. That's my personal property. You don't have authority to search it. Whitmore stared at him, then shrugged, slid the phone back into Owen's pocket. Touchy. He stepped back. Exercise over. Get in the car. Owen peeled his hands off the hood. The skin on both palms was bright red, borderline blistered. He flexed his fingers once, twice, and got back in the passenger seat without a sound. Whitmore drove back toward the station. But instead of pulling into the main lot, he turned left, down a side street, past the impound yard, into the back lot, the one officers used for smoke breaks and conversations they didn't want on camera. 2 cruisers were already parked there, doors open. 4 officers standing in a loose semicircle, coffee cups, sunglasses, arms crossed, waiting. Whitmore parked, killed the engine. Get out. Owen stepped out. The 4 officers looked at him the way a group looks at something they've already discussed. One of them, a tall officer with a shaved head and a neck tattoo peeking above his collar, stepped forward. So this is the new guy. This is him, Whitmore said. The tall officer circled Owen slowly, looked at his stained polo, his dusty pants, the red welts forming on both palms. Heard you were a big deal in Virginia. That true? Owen said nothing. I asked you a question. I'm just here to work. The officer laughed, short, sharp. Work, brother. You spent yesterday cleaning toilets and today getting frisked in a parking lot. That doesn't sound like work. That sounds like someone who doesn't know where he stands. He stepped closer, dropped his voice. Let me make it simple for you. Crawford runs this place. Not the chief, not the mayor. Crawford. And if Crawford says you clean toilets, you clean toilets. If Crawford says you carry boxes, you carry boxes. And if Crawford says you don't belong here, he poked Owen's chest with one finger, then you don't belong here. We clear. Owen looked at the finger on his chest, then at the man behind it, then at the 3 others standing in the semicircle. We're clear. Good. The officer stepped back. Now get back in the car. Your ride-along isn't over. Owen got back in the passenger seat. Whitmore drove them back to the station in silence. The radio crackled with calls they never responded to. When they pulled into the station lot, another cruiser was already there, parked at an angle, doors open. 2 officers standing outside. Crawford says bring the new guy to the locker room. Something came up. Owen followed Whitmore inside, through the bullpen, down the hall, into the locker room. Crawford was standing in the center of the room, arms crossed, Dawson to his left. 2 other officers flanking the doorway behind Owen, cutting off the exit. Henderson, we've got a situation. Crawford held up a clear plastic bag. Inside it, a small pocket knife with a black handle. This was found in your locker during a routine safety inspection. Concealed weapon in a department facility, that's a violation. Owen looked at the knife. He'd never seen it before in his life. That's not mine. It was in your locker. Someone put it there, just like the wallet. Crawford tilted his head. You know what I'm starting to notice about you, Henderson? Everything that ends up in your locker somehow isn't yours. The wallet wasn't yours. The knife isn't yours. At what point do we stop believing you? He stepped forward, close. Owen could see the capillaries in Crawford's nose. Could smell the stale coffee. I could file this right now. Concealed weapon. That's not a slap on the wrist, Henderson. That's a termination offense. Day 2. Silence. But I'm a fair man. Crawford pulled the bag back. So here's what's going to happen. This goes in my desk drawer. It stays there for now. Consider it insurance. You behave, you keep your head down. You do what I tell you, and this never sees the light of day. He leaned in, whispered. But if you ever go over my head, make a complaint, call anyone outside this building. This knife shows up in your file, and you're done. Not just here, everywhere. Owen's face was stone. His eyes moved slowly from Crawford to Dawson to Whitmore to the 2 officers behind him. He memorized every face, every badge number, every word. Understood, Sergeant. Crawford smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Good boy. Now go home. Your shift's over. Same time tomorrow and bring a better attitude. Owen turned, walked through the doorway, down the hall, through the bullpen, past the front desk, out the door. The evening air hit his face like cold water. He stood in the parking lot for 30 seconds, breathed in, breathed out. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, stopped the recording. 8 hours and 43 minutes. Every single second captured. He opened his contacts, scrolled to one name. Angela Moore. She picked up on the second ring. It's Henderson. I have everything we need. Come tomorrow morning and bring internal affairs. No. Are you serious right now? They planted a knife in this man's locker and used it to blackmail him. Day 2. Imagine that's you standing there. 15 years of service and 5 guys are cornering you in a locker room telling you to keep your mouth shut. What would you do? 7:22 the next morning. Day 3. Owen arrived before anyone else. Same faded polo washed in the motel sink the night before, still slightly damp at the collar. Same khaki pants. Same shoes Crawford had spat on 2 days ago. He signed in at the front desk, walked to his seat in the back row, sat down, waited. By 7:45 the bullpen was full. Crawford held court near the dispatch counter, coffee in hand, telling Whitmore something that made them both laugh. Dawson sat at his desk, pretending to file reports. Nora Sullivan typed quietly behind the filing cabinet. Everything looked exactly like the first 2 days, except for the 3 black sedans that had just pulled into the parking lot. At 7:55, the front doors opened. Deputy Chief Angela Moore walked in first. Black suit, white shirt, badge on her belt. She didn't greet anyone, didn't smile, didn't slow down. Behind her, 2 men in dark suits carrying briefcases. State Police Internal Affairs Division. Their credentials hung from lanyards around their necks. Moore walked straight to the center of the bullpen and stopped. All personnel, briefing room, now, no exceptions. Crawford looked up from his coffee, frowned. Chief Moore, what's this about? We weren't told about any... Now, Sergeant. The room moved. Chairs scraped. Murmurs rippled. Officers filed into the briefing room, the same room where Crawford had torn Owen's paperwork in half 3 days ago. Crawford took his usual seat, front row, center, arms crossed. Whitmore sat to his right. Dawson, 2 seats over. The room filled. Every seat taken, officers lining the walls. Owen sat in the back. Same chair, same corner, same silence. Moore stood at the podium. She didn't use notes, didn't need them. 3 days ago, this department received a new commanding officer. selected from over 60 applicants by a joint panel of the City Council, the Mayor's Office, and the State Police Commission. She paused. Let the words settle. That process was completed 8 weeks ago. The appointment was confirmed, signed, and sealed. Crawford shifted in his seat. Something behind his eyes started to move. Not fear yet, but the beginning of a question he didn't want to ask. Moore continued. The new captain chose to report for duty without introduction. No ceremony, no announcement. He wanted to observe this department's culture from the inside, unfiltered. Dead silence. Moore looked toward the back of the room. Every head in the room followed her gaze. Captain Owen Henderson, please come forward. The sound that followed was not a gasp. It was the absence of all sound, like someone had pulled the air out of the room with a syringe. Owen stood, slowly. He reached into his duffel bag, the same bag he'd carried through the front door on day 1, and pulled out a garment bag. Unzipped it. Inside, a full dress uniform. Captain's insignia on the collar. 2 Valor Award ribbons on the chest. Pressed. Perfect. He put it on right there, in front of everyone, button by button. The room watched a man they'd made clean toilets transform into the highest-ranking officer in their building. Owen walked to the front, each step deliberate, each step silent. He passed Dawson, who stared at the floor, past Whitmore, whose face had gone sheet white, past Crawford and stopped. He looked down at Crawford for exactly 3 seconds, said nothing, then continued to the podium. Owen set his phone on the podium, pressed play. Crawford's voice filled the room. Filthy black bastard, who the hell gave you permission to step foot in my precinct? Every officer heard it. Every officer recognized the voice. Owen let the recording play. The sound of papers tearing, the slur about Owen's mother, the order to clean the bathroom, the wallet accusation, the planted knife, the blackmail threat, every word crystal clear. He pressed stop. The silence that followed was heavier than anything Crawford had ever put on Owen's shoulders. Owen looked out at the room. His voice was quiet, controlled. The voice of a man who had spent 3 days being spat on and had chosen not to flinch. I spent 3 days in this building. I cleaned your bathrooms. I hauled your boxes. I was frisked in a parking lot accused of theft and blackmailed with a planted weapon. He paused, and not one of you said a word. He turned to Crawford. Sergeant Crawford, badge and weapon on the table. You're on administrative leave effective immediately, pending a full internal affairs investigation. Crawford's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Officer Whitmore, desk duty, effective now, separate from Sergeant Crawford. Whitmore's hands were shaking. Officer Dawson, you'll submit a written statement to internal affairs by end of day. Owen looked at the rest of the room. For everyone else, if you participated, you'll be interviewed. If you watched and said nothing, you'll be interviewed too. This department is under formal review starting today. He stepped back from the podium. Moore stepped forward and nodded to the 2 IA investigators who opened their briefcases and began laying out paperwork. Crawford still hadn't moved. His coffee sat on the chair's armrest, untouched, getting cold. His sergeant's bars, the ones he wore like a general's stars, suddenly looked very, very small. Crawford didn't make it 10 steps out of the briefing room before the first investigator stopped him. Sergeant Crawford, this way, please. They led him to interview room B, the same room Crawford had used 100 times to stare down suspects. Same table, same chairs, same one-way mirror. Except now he was on the wrong side of it. The IA investigator, a tall man with silver hair and a state police badge, sat across from him, opened a folder, placed Owen's phone in the center of the table. Sergeant, I'm going to play several recordings. After each one, you'll have the opportunity to respond. Crawford leaned back, tried to cross his arms, couldn't figure out where to put his hands. They ended up flat on the table, palms down, fingers spread like a man trying to keep his balance on a surface that was no longer solid. The first recording played. His own voice ordering Owen to clean bathrooms, calling him a filthy black bastard. The part about Owen's mother. That was...
That was just station talk. We talk like that to every new officer gets called a racial slur and told his mother is a prostitute. Crawford closed his mouth. The second recording. The wallet setup. Dawson confirming a fake timeline. Crawford threatening to put it in Owen's file. That wallet situation was a misunderstanding. Dawson genuinely thought, "Dawson has already provided a preliminary statement, Sergeant. His version doesn't match yours." Crawford blinked. "What did Dawson say?" "That's not your concern right now." The third recording, the planted knife, the blackmail, Crawford's whispered threat. "If you ever go over my head, this knife shows up in your file and you're done." The investigator let the recording finish, then closed the folder. "Sergeant Crawford, your badge and service weapon, please." Crawford's hands trembled as he unclipped his badge. The metal made a small sound when it hit the table, barely a tap, but in that room it sounded like a door closing. He unholstered his weapon, placed it beside the badge. 22 years, and it all fit on one corner of a table. "You are on immediate administrative leave without pay, effective now. You are not to contact any member of the Ridgewood Police Department, sworn or civilian, until the investigation is concluded. Violation of this order will result in additional charges. Do you understand? I want my union rep." "That's your right, but the leave is not negotiable." Two officers, state police, not Ridgewood, escorted Crawford out. Not through the back, through the front, through the bullpen, past every desk, every face, every officer who had laughed at his jokes and followed his orders for 22 years. Nobody made eye contact. Crawford carried a cardboard box with his nameplate, a coffee mug, and a framed photo of himself shaking hands with a city councilman. The photo was from 12 years ago. The councilman had since been voted out. At the front door, Crawford paused, turned around. Owen was standing at the end of the hallway, arms at his sides, face unreadable. Crawford opened his mouth, maybe to say something defiant, maybe to apologize, maybe just to prove he could still make sound. Nothing came out. He turned and walked through the door. The glass closed behind him. The parking lot swallowed him up. Back inside, the dominoes fell fast. Whitmore was pulled into interview room A, separated from Crawford physically and strategically. The investigators weren't interested in loyalty. They were interested in truth. And truth, it turned out, was something Whitmore was willing to trade when his own career was on the line. Dawson sat in the hallway outside the briefing room, staring at his shoes, waiting for his name to be called. His preliminary statement had already contradicted Crawford's version of the wallet incident. He knew what that meant. He just hadn't figured out how deep the hole was yet. Every officer who had been in the locker room during the knife incident was placed on the interview list. Every officer who had witnessed the first-day confrontation and said nothing was placed on a secondary review list. By noon on day 3, the Ridgewood Police Department was no longer Crawford's house. It was Owen Henderson's. The investigation didn't stay inside the building for long. Within 48 hours, the state police IA team had expanded their scope. What started as a 3-day harassment case turned into a 5-year audit of Sergeant Dwayne Crawford's conduct and the department culture that had protected him. The first break came from Whitmore. Seated in interview room A with no union rep and a career hanging by a thread, Whitmore talked. Not because he wanted to, because he had no other cards left to play. "Crawford told me to make Henderson's first day hell. His exact words were, 'I don't care what you have to do, make sure that guy knows this isn't his house. If he's a diversity hire, he'll fold by lunch.'" The investigators asked Whitmore about the wallet. Crawford set it up. He took Dawson's wallet from the break room, put it in Henderson's locker himself. Told Dawson to report it missing and confirm the timeline. The knife. Same thing. Crawford brought it from home, planted it during the overnight shift when nobody was around. He told me about it before Henderson even showed up on day 2. Said it was insurance. Whitmore's statement ran 16 pages. He signed every one. Dawson's interview was shorter. He confirmed the wallet setup. Confirmed Crawford gave him a script for what to say.
Confirmed he knew it was fabricated. Why did you go along with it? Dawson stared at the table. Because Crawford told me to. And nobody says no to Crawford. Nobody said no, the investigator repeated. For 22 years. Dawson didn't answer. The second break came from outside Ridgewood. When IA pulled Crawford's full personnel file, they found the 3 sustained complaints all involving Black or Latino civilians. But behind those 3 were 11 more that had been filed and withdrawn. 11 people who had started the complaint process and then stopped. The investigators tracked down 8 of them. 6 agreed to give statements. The stories were almost identical. Crawford had used his position to intimidate, harass, and humiliate. And when complaints were filed, he'd used the union, the old boy network, and the threat of retaliation to make them disappear. But the most damaging testimony came from 2 people who had never filed complaints at all, because they weren't civilians. They were cops. Officer Raymond Garza, Hispanic, 7 years at Ridgewood, transferred to Syracuse PD 3 years ago. His statement. Crawford had assigned him permanent overnight shifts for 11 straight months after Garza reported a use of force concern. No explanation, no review, just exile. Officer Denise Colbert, Black, 5 years at Ridgewood, transferred to Albany 2 years ago. Her statement. Crawford had called her a quota badge in front of the entire shift on her first week. When she reported it, the complaint was logged and Crawford was informed of who filed it within 24 hours. She transferred within the month. 2 officers, 2 careers disrupted, 2 people who left Ridgewood because staying meant accepting Crawford's rule. Owen read both statements in his office on a Thursday night, alone, door closed. He sat with them for a long time. By week 3, the media had the story. The Ridgewood Gazette ran it first, front page above the fold. State police investigate Ridgewood PD sergeant for racial harassment, evidence tampering. Local TV followed the same day. By the end of the week, Albany stations were running it. A regional AP stringer picked it up. It went statewide. The community responded fast. A local civil rights attorney named Denise Palmer organized a town hall at the Ridgewood Community Center. 300 people showed up, standing room only. Residents who had filed excessive force complaints stood at the microphone and told their stories, some for the first time publicly. The town hall lasted 3 hours. Person after person walked to that microphone. A mother whose 17-year-old son had been thrown against a patrol car for walking home from a basketball game. A store owner on 5th Street who'd been inspected 14 times in 1 year, always by the same 2 officers. A retired teacher who'd filed a complaint in writing, in person with documentation, and never received a response. Every story was different. Every story sounded the same. Owen sat through all of it. He didn't interrupt, didn't defend, didn't explain. When the last speaker finished, he stood up and said one thing. I hear you. And things are going to change. Not eventually. Now. The Ridgewood Gazette printed that line as the headline the next morning. 2 days later, the mayor held a press conference. Standing beside Owen and Deputy Chief Moore, he announced a formal partnership with the State Attorney General's office to conduct a comprehensive review of the department's policies, hiring practices, and complaint handling procedures. It wasn't optional. It wasn't symbolic. It was a consent agreement, the kind that comes with oversight deadlines and consequences for non-compliance. Crawford watched the press conference from his living room, still on bail, awaiting trial. His attorney had advised him not to speak to the media. He didn't. But his neighbor told the Gazette that Crawford had stopped mowing his lawn, stopped picking up his mail, and hadn't been seen outside in over a week. The walls were closing in. Crawford's trial began 9 weeks after his suspension. The prosecution's case was built on 3 pillars: Owen's recordings, Whitmore's testimony, and the pattern of conduct revealed by the expanded investigation. Crawford's defense attorney tried to frame it as aggressive mentoring, standard law enforcement culture taken out of context, misinterpreted by an outsider who didn't understand how departments like Ridgewood operated. The jury didn't buy it. The recordings were played in open court. Every slur, every threat, every whispered word about the planted knife. The courtroom heard Crawford's voice say, "Filthy black bastard," through the speakers, and the defense attorney's argument about context collapsed in real time. Whitmore took the stand. He confirmed everything. The jury watched a young officer describe in detail how his sergeant had instructed him to humiliate a fellow officer based on the color of his skin. Crawford's text messages were entered into evidence. The most damaging, a message sent to Whitmore at 6:14 on the morning of Owen's first day. "New guy starts today, black, from Virginia. Make his life hell. If he's another diversity hire, he won't last a week." The trial lasted 6 days. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty. All counts. Filing a false official report felony, official misconduct, civil rights violations under New York state law. The judge, a 20-year veteran of the bench named Harold Winston, delivered the sentence without looking at Crawford.
Sergeant Crawford, you were entrusted with a badge that represents the safety and dignity of every citizen in this community. You used that badge as a weapon against the people it was meant to protect, including your own colleagues. The law does not excuse this. The uniform does not excuse this. And 22 years of service does not excuse this. 18 months in state prison. Permanent decertification as a law enforcement officer in the state of New York. $50,000 in fines. Crawford stood motionless as the sentence was read. He didn't speak, didn't react, just stared straight ahead at the wall behind the judge, the way a man stares when the thing he's looking at is the rest of his life and he doesn't recognize it. Whitmore received a 6-month suspension without pay, mandatory retraining, and 2 years of probationary status. Dawson received a formal reprimand on his permanent record and was required to complete a 40-hour civil rights and ethics retraining course. The 2 officers who had blocked the locker room doorway during the knife incident each received written reprimands and were placed on performance review for 12 months. No one at Ridgewood Police Department would ever say Crawford's name the same way again. Owen Henderson didn't celebrate the verdict. The night the sentence came down, he drove back to the station, parked in the public lot, same spot he'd used on day 1, walked through the front entrance, sat in his office, and started writing. Not a speech, not a memo, a plan. Within 6 months, Ridgewood Police Department looked like a different building, not because the walls changed, but because the rules inside them did. Mandatory body cameras on every shift, no exceptions, no malfunctions. Every interaction recorded, every recording stored on a system that no single officer could access or delete alone. An independent civilian oversight board. 7 members appointed by the city council with full subpoena power. Not advisory, not symbolic, real authority to investigate, review, and recommend disciplinary action. A zero-tolerance hazing policy, not buried in a handbook nobody read, posted in the briefing room, posted in the locker room, posted above the coffee machine in the break room. Every new officer received a copy on day 1, signed by Owen personally. And a mentorship program. Every new transfer paired with a senior officer, vetted through internal affairs, reviewed quarterly, evaluated by the new officer anonymously. No more Crawfords deciding who survived and who didn't. Owen didn't talk about what happened on his first 3 days, not publicly, not in interviews. When the Ridgewood Gazette asked for a comment after the trial, he gave them one sentence: "The department is moving forward." That was it. No victory lap, no speeches, just work. The people around him changed too. Nora Sullivan, the officer who had sat behind the filing cabinet and said nothing, requested a meeting with Owen 2 weeks after Crawford's sentencing. She sat across from his desk, hands folded, and said 4 words: "I should have spoken." Owen looked at her for a long moment. "You're speaking now." Sullivan enrolled in the department's new leadership development program, completed it in 8 months, passed the sergeant's exam on her first attempt. 18 months after the day she watched Crawford spit on Owen's shoes, she pinned sergeant's bars to her own collar, earned on merit, reviewed by the oversight board, approved by Owen himself. She became the department's lead trainer for de-escalation tactics. The officers she trained didn't just learn techniques. They learned what silence costs.
Officer Raymond Garza, the Hispanic officer Crawford had exiled to overnight shifts, returned to Ridgewood from Syracuse. He requested the transfer personally. "I left because of one man," he told Owen. "I'm coming back because of a different one." Officer Denise Colbert, the black officer Crawford had called a quota badge, returned from Albany. She was assigned to the Community Liaison Unit and became one of the most requested officers at town hall events. Whitmore completed his retraining. He stayed on the force, stayed on probation. He was quieter now. Whether that was growth or just survival, nobody could say for certain. But he never again stood behind another man's cruelty and called it loyalty. Dawson transferred out, quietly. No farewell party, no announcement. He put in his papers on a Tuesday and was gone by Friday. Nobody asked where he went. Crawford served 14 months of his 18-month sentence. Released on good behavior. Decertified. Unable to wear a badge anywhere in the state of New York ever again. He moved out of state. No forwarding address. No public statement. Just gone. 3 years after Owen Henderson walked through the front door of the Ridgewood Police Department carrying a duffel bag and a sealed envelope, the department's numbers told a story that no speech could. Excessive force complaints down 60%. Officers of color on the force 30% up from 12. Community Trust survey approval rating, the highest in the department's recorded history. And every morning Owen Henderson still parked in the public lot. Still walked through the front entrance. Still nodded at the desk sergeant on his way in. "Morning, Captain. Morning." Man, can you even imagine? You show up day one, get spat on, called every name in the book, forced to scrub toilets, and you just sit there and take it, knowing you're about to become their boss? What would you do in Owen's shoes? Drop it in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. I'll see you next time.